Welcome back to the Dinar Daily Buzz channel, long regarded as a leading voice in global currency reform and economic transition. What many are calling one of the most consequential developments in Iraq's financial overhaul has just taken place. The Iraqi Gazette, the government's official record, has published details of a long-anticipated piece of legislation known as the new four-step exchange law. For years, analysts, investors and observers worldwide have speculated about where the Iraqi Dinar (IQD) might be headed. Rumors have often overshadowed verified information, but this new legal blueprint finally offers formal language and mechanisms that hint at genuine evolution within Iraq's currency framework. The long-running conversation around the IQD has always blended macroeconomic analysis, geopolitical context, anecdote and aspirational storytelling, with people poring over central bank statements, parsing legislative drafts and sifting through secondary sources to construct a probable path forward. That mixture of sources, some robust, some thin, has produced both insightful commentary and misleading noise. Against that backdrop, the emergence of a legal blueprint that articulates principles, procedures and institutional responsibilities feels materially different because it places potential changes onto a written, reviewable foundation. Legal language matters. It establishes responsibilities, creates enforceable procedures and signals intent in a way that rumors cannot. If the draft or enacted law truly clarifies how currency will be classified, how exchange procedures will be managed and how oversight will be handled, then stakeholders gain something important: a framework to assess options, prepare compliance measures and consider the practical implications of any future decision. However, it's essential to balance that optimism with prudence, reading a law or draft carefully, understanding the difference between enabling language and immediate action, and recognizing that legal reform is often an incremental process, requiring additional rulemaking and international coordination and operational upgrades before any tangible market shift occurs. In short, the existence of formal language is substantive. It reduces some uncertainty, but it does not automatically equate to an immediate or guaranteed market outcome. Stakeholders should treat such blueprints as meaningful signals that invite careful evidence-based planning rather than as definitive confirmation of any specific timeline. For American audiences, especially those monitoring the possibility of a Dinar revaluation (RV), this may be the clearest sign yet that movement is not a question of if but when and in what form. Even so, the excitement must be balanced with a careful look at the law itself. For many US-based watchers who have followed IQD chatter for years, a legal text provides a new axis of analysis. Whereas rumors and forum posts offer anecdote, legal language offers concrete obligations, delegated authorities and procedural steps that can be evaluated from a compliance perspective. U.S. stakeholders must also consider how any Iraqi legal changes interact with American tax law, reporting requirements and banking regulations. That means interpreting the law through multiple lenses: the monetary and macroeconomic intentions embedded in the draft, the operational capabilities of Iraqi institutions to implement it, the likely reaction of international partners in financial markets, and the ripple effects for holders of physical or digital dinar outside Iraq. It's also important to parse the language carefully. Does the text create a binding schedule for conversion? Does it merely authorize the central bank to adopt rules in the future? Are there conditions tied to international assistance, IMF programs or fiscal policy milestones? These distinctions matter enormously because they determine whether the law is an enabling statute, a permission slip for future rulemaking, or a concrete roadmap that triggers immediate administrative actions. American readers should therefore use the law as a data point, meaningful and potentially consequential, but one piece within a broader mosaic that includes operational capacity, political will and international coordination. Above all, excitement should be tempered by analysis and professional counsel so that individuals make choices consistent with legal realities and prudent financial planning. Let's break it down step by step to separate reality from speculation and gain meaningful clarity. The purpose of dissecting the law clause by clause is not to extinguish hope but to replace conjecture with comprehension. When you examine statutes closely, you often find three types of provisions: broad policy statements that signal intent, enabling clauses that delegate rulemaking authority to an agency or ministry, and procedural mandates that create specific steps and timelines. Each category carries different practical implications. A high-level policy statement signals political intent but does not by itself change market operations. An enabling clause may be a prerequisite for operational change, but it typically requires subsequent regulatory action: drafting, implementing regulations, issuing internal procedures, and developing technical infrastructure before outcomes change for end users. Procedural mandates, by contrast, can sometimes be acted upon more quickly because they establish concrete steps and responsibilities. The critical exercise for stakeholders is to identify which parts of the law are which provisions are declarative, which require administrative follow-through, and which create immediate obligations. Additionally, looking beyond the text to how the law interacts with existing institutions, the Central Bank of Iraq, the Ministry of Finance, and any supervisory or auditing bodies, provides further clarity about feasibility and timelines. Finally, distinguishing legally authorized pathways from informal or rumor-driven channels is essential for anyone considering action. The step-by-step analysis that follows aims to illuminate those distinctions where the law creates actual mechanisms versus where it merely signals intent, what each provision would practically require to implement, and how each element might affect holders of dinar both inside Iraq and abroad. By systematically evaluating these points, readers can reduce the noise and build a reasoned perspective rooted in documented legal change. Step 1: Redefining what counts as exchangeable currency. The first step is foundational and its importance is substantial. By recasting the legal definition of what constitutes an exchangeable currency, the law reshapes the baseline rules that determine legitimacy in international and domestic markets. Redefinition can encompass numerous dimensions: specifying issuance authority, which notes or coins are legal tender; clarifying the role of commemorative or obsolete denominations; defining authentication and serial number verification procedures; and enumerating the certifications required for bank-grade currency acceptance. These elements matter because they determine what institutions both inside Iraq and globally will treat as acceptable for formal exchange. If the law narrows acceptable forms of tender to specific series of banknotes or issues technical standards for acceptable condition and provenance, then holders of older or unofficially issued notes may find their assets legally excluded from formal exchange windows. Conversely, a law that broadens acceptable criteria or that explicitly authorizes conversion of previously non-exchangeable instruments under controlled procedures could open pathways for wider inclusion. The legal language may also mandate that the central bank or a designated authority publish lists, issue identification guides, and implement public awareness campaigns to reduce confusion. Operationalizing such a redefinition requires logistical capacity, training bank staff, updating identification scanners, building verification databases, and designing secure transit and storage protocols, all of which affect practical timelines. Ultimately, redefining exchangeable currency is not merely symbolic, it reorders market reality. But the transition between statutory definition and market practice depends on the clarity of the law's technical standards and the institutional capacity to execute them without introducing ambiguity or logistical bottlenecks. By codifying new classification requirements, Iraq is modernizing its monetary laws to fit internationally accepted practices. The legislation spells out the characteristics of currency, especially the dinar, must meet to be recognized for formal exchange. These include issuance standards, backing requirements, transparency measures, and oversight by the Central Bank of Iraq (CBI). Each of these components has both technical and legal implications that deserve careful unpacking. Issuance standards determine which printing series, denominations, and authorized signatures confer legal status. Backing requirements outline what, if anything, will be held in reserve or used to support value claims. Transparency measures could require public reporting, audit trails, or internationally accessible registries, and explicit oversight by the CBIE. establishes a single point of regulatory and operational responsibility. Bringing these components into statutory form signals an intention to harmonize domestic monetary governance with the expectations of investors, correspondent banks, and international financial institutions. That harmonization can reduce frictions and cross-border transactions because it provides counterparties with clearer assurances regarding authenticity, regulatory backing, and dispute resolution channels. Yet declaring these standards in law is only the beginning. Implementation requires clear technical specifications, robust institutional capacity, and ongoing compliance monitoring. For example, if backing requirements reference foreign reserve holdings or commodity-linked instruments, then auditability and transparency become central to maintaining credibility. If transparency measures mandate public reports, then the timing, content, and accessibility of those reports matter, and if oversight duties fall to the CBI, the bank must have both the legal mandate and the operational budget to conduct verifications, maintain registries, and coordinate with international partners. In some, modernization through codification matters because it can set the preconditions for international acceptance, but those preconditions will only affect the market positively if they are implemented with technical rigor and sufficient institutional support. It also references international guidelines from institutions like the IMF and BIS, signaling Iraq's intention to integrate with recognized global financial norms. This is a notable signal because referencing external frameworks creates an expectation of compatibility which can ease interactions with correspondent banking systems and multilateral lenders. The IMF, Bank for International Settlements, and other standard-setting bodies provide a set of best practices regarding reserve reporting, monetary policy, transparency, anti-money laundering protocols, and bank supervision that many countries cite when they seek to align domestic policy with internationally accepted standards. When law explicitly leverages or references these norms, it indicates at least rhetorical commitment to transparency, reporting, and external validation for international actors. Such references can reduce perceived policy risk by indicating that reforms will follow tested methodological approaches rather than ad hoc or idiosyncratic practices. Practically, however, the mere citation of international guidelines is not synonymous with instant compliance. True integration requires audits, capacity building, statutory alignments, and ongoing cooperation processes that can span months or years. Partner institutions may require proof of implementation, such as published audit reports, verifiable reserve holdings, or demonstrable upgrades to central bank governance before responding with technical assistance or altering their operational terms. Nevertheless, inclusion of IMF and BIS language provides an important framing device. It communicates to international markets that Iraq intends to play by widely understood rules for stakeholders. That matters because it raises the probability that any future actions will be scrutinized through standard global channels, making it more likely that the consequences of change, be it revaluation, redenomination, or operational reform, will be navigated in cooperation with external authorities rather than in isolation. For US-based dinar holders, this suggests that Iraq is laying the structural groundwork for greater global visibility, and necessary foundation for any future redenomination or valuation shift to be embraced internationally. The distinction between domestic legal reform and international acceptance is critical. Domestic statutes can authorize and organize local activities, but international acceptance depends on correspondent banks, foreign regulators, custodial institutions, and sometimes multilateral lenders being willing to engage under the new rules. US-based holders should therefore view the law as an important preliminary step. It creates the scaffolding that could enable operational changes, but it does not by itself guarantee that global markets or foreign governments will immediately accept a new valuation or redenomination without due diligence. Practical barriers such as compliance checks, sanction screening, provenance verification, and tax reporting will continue to shape how U.S. institutions handle dinar-related flows. Additionally, U.S. holders must consider domestic legal implications, including reporting obligations, capital gains treatment and potential anti-money laundering and counter-financing of terrorism scrutiny if large volumes move across borders. Preparation may thus involve legal consultations documenting the provenance of notes, ensuring appropriate custody arrangements, and understanding reporting thresholds. The law's structural groundwork is valuable because it signals intent and creates a basis for standard procedures, but converting that groundwork into internationally actionable movement requires sustained institutional coordination, verifiable transparency, and credible operational readiness that satisfies the risk management frameworks of global financial counterparties. Step 2: Establishing an official framework for exchange rate adjustments. The second step is arguably the most watched among investors and currency speculators. Here the law defines a formal system for how the CBI may publish, update, or alter the dinar's exchange rate. The legal codification of an exchange rate framework is significant because currency valuation is a function of both market dynamics and institutional policy. When a central bank is given specific statutory authority to manage rates under prescribed protocols, it reduces the ambiguity around who can act, how they must act, and the checks that accompany that authority. The law may require promulgation of rules around the timing of announcements, the channels used to communicate rate changes, coordination with fiscal policy, and the documentation needed to justify an adjustment. By creating these procedural guardrails, legislators aim to prevent abrupt, poorly documented shifts that could cause market disruption or invite accusations of manipulation for market participants. A statutory framework can create predictability by clarifying the circumstances under which rate changes may occur, for example in response to inflationary pressures, reserve changes, or international agreements, and the procedural steps that must be followed. Nevertheless, the practical implications depend on the level of discretion granted, the criteria specified for action, and the capacity of the CBI to coordinate with other agencies and with international partners. If the law couples rate authority with robust transparency obligations such as publishing supporting data, consulting with external experts, or coordinating with the IMF, then it can build credibility. Conversely, if the law grants wide discretion without clear accountability mechanisms, stakeholders will remain uncertain about how and when changes might be enacted. Thus, while codifying the exchange rate mechanism addresses a crucial regulatory lacuna, its impact will be determined by the balance between authority and accountability embedded in the text, and by how that balance is operationalized in practice. This isn't merely procedural, it's about establishing authority, transparency, and trustworthiness. The CBI must now follow standardized protocols before announcing any rate changes. These include advanced notification, documentation procedures, and coordination with international bodies like the IMF. Moreover, any exchange rate modification must be widely published through verified platforms, including the Iraqi Gazette, official digital portals, and international news systems. Though the law does not set a specific date for changes, it does outline the mechanism. Iraq is effectively declaring that any future shifts in the dinar's value will be lawful, transparent, and internationally coordinated, not sudden or secretive. That set of commitments is meaningful because it reframes potential action from rumor-driven speculation to institutionally governed processes. Advanced notification and documentation requirements reduce the possibility of surprise announcements that could destabilize both domestic and external markets, while coordination with international bodies can help ensure technical rigor and lend credibility to decisions. Requiring publication on official verifiable channels makes it more difficult for misinformation to spread and easier for counterparties to verify the legitimacy of any announced changes. Importantly, however, the absence of a specific date signals an intentional separation between authorization and execution. Lawmakers may be granting the CBI the tools to act while deliberately avoiding preset timelines to retain necessary flexibility for holders and observers. The takeaway is twofold. The law builds procedures intended to foster trust and diminish chaotic market reactions, but it also underscores that timing will be driven by technical, fiscal, and political considerations rather than by calendared promises. That combination of institutionalization and indeterminate timing reduces certain risks while preserving the central bank's ability to respond to dynamic economic conditions. Step 3. Creating legal channels for international interaction with the dinar. The third step focuses on external engagement. This portion defines how foreign banks, global exchanges and digital platforms can legally interact with the Iraqi dinar. This is critical for linking Iraq's domestic currency to the global market. The law clarifies who may conduct dinar-related transactions and establishes reporting requirements, verification procedures and digital safeguards. Notably, it includes language allowing for future integration with blockchain and secure digital ledger technologies. This could eventually enable U.S. institutions and online platforms to offer legal dinar transactions within a regulated environment for those holding dinar outside Iraq. This step could prove pivotal. It signals Iraq's readiness to make the dinar more accessible and more compatible with global finance. Assuming reforms continue progressing. Step 4. Anti-fraud measures and compliance enforcement. The fourth step tackles the long-standing issues of fraud, manipulation and black market trading. It introduces strict compliance rules designed to restore integrity to Iraq's monetary ecosystem. Requirements include audit trails for large exchanges, mandatory reporting for institutions handling the dinar, and the creation of a new oversight authority with investigative powers. Penalties for violations range from heavy fines to license revocation and even criminal prosecution. By strengthening enforcement, Iraq aims to demonstrate its seriousness to international observers. This isn't just about preventing misconduct, it's about building credibility. Strong compliance is essential if Iraq hopes to attract foreign investment or participate in the global financial system on stable terms. Redenomination, explained without misconceptions. A frequent source of confusion within the dinar community is the difference between redenomination and devaluation. The why are not the same. Redenomination is essentially a recalibration of currency denominations, such as retiring 25,000 IQD notes and introducing 25 IQD notes, without altering the currency's real purchasing power. The value remains the same, only the numbers change. This move is common in countries emerging from periods of inflation and is intended to streamline commerce, increase financial literacy and improve anti-counterfeit protections for dinar holders, especially those abroad. This does not reduce the underlying value of their holdings. Instead, it reflects Iraq's effort to modernize and simplify its currency landscape. Nationwide education and public awareness campaign. Knowing that reforms can only succeed if citizens understand them, Iraq has launched a countrywide education campaign. This includes television, radio, newspapers and local meetings. Information is being shared in multiple languages and dialects, ensuring wide accessibility. Government officials, economists, and respected community figures. Reactively explaining the law, addressing misconceptions and providing guidance. The goal is to build an informed public that can confidently navigate the transition and avoid scams or misinformation. For global observers, this underscores Iraq's commitment to transparency and public participation. Growing international attention and financial interest. As news of the exchange law spreads, global markets are starting to take notice. Banks in the Gulf, firms in Asia, and international institutions are reassessing Iraq's economic trajectory. A major factor behind this renewed interest is Iraq's robust foreign currency reserves, the strongest in more than 20 years. These reserves reflect deliberate fiscal management, improved controls and reduced corruption. With a substantial financial buffer, Iraq is able to pursue reforms without relying heavily on external loans or aid for investors in emerging markets. This signals durability and seriousness. While this does not indicate dramatic movement, yet it confirms that Iraq's financial system is maturing and attracting attention.